we are seeing now, daily, freedom of speech and censorship being increased and increased and increased towards that desired outcome of deleting all information that the authorities don't want people to see. Now, what's been happening? The internet was actually created by this cabal. We can talk about that if you like, about why that was and where it's going. But one of the reasons is that they wanted to put all information eventually that people receive and where they get their information, thus their perceptions, which come from information received, that's what perceptions are, from the internet, digitally. And the reason they want to do that is because once it's digital, then you can use algorithms to censor. You don't even need human input. Once the codes are in place, the algorithms, as they're doing now, will censor what people can see and hear. Now, what is freedom of speech? It's the freedom to speak. And if you have the freedom to speak, then you have the ability to challenge the prevailing narrative, and thus you're never in a situation where people only see and hear what the authorities want you to see and hear. For that to be reached, that situation, free speech has to be deleted. Otherwise they're not going to get there. That's why free speech is being deleted. And George Orwell had this concept of freedom, in effect, being the ability to say that 2 and 2 equals 4. Because while you have the right to say 2 and 2 equals 4, you have the right to freedom of speech. You have the right to speak factually and not be censored, even though you're speaking fact, but they're wrong facts from the authorities' point of view. And in 1984, in the book, society moved to a point where they were told they had to believe that 2 and 2 equaled 5. And you couldn't say 2 and 2 equaled 4 anymore. You had to believe that 2 and 2 equaled 5, because that's what the authority wanted you to believe, so they got the outcome that they wanted. And what happens is that initially, and we're in that point now, when you're being pressured to believe 2 and 2 equals 5 and to say it and not contradict it, there is a resistance which says, well, it's a load of bloody nonsense. 2 and 2 doesn't equal 5. But when you then start giving people consequences for not accepting 2 and 2 equals 5, abuse, losing your job, all the rest of it, marginalization, people then start, in search of self-respect, they don't want to accept that what they're doing is being kowtowed into saying 2 and 2 equals 5 when they know it's 4. So they start to convince themselves 2 and 2 equals 5. So it becomes not their enforced reality eventually, it becomes their perceived reality. And suddenly the world's gone freaking mad. And that is absolutely the process that's happening now. What level of madness, mate, have we reached when professors of biology are being investigated by their universities and abused by students for saying that men and women are biologically different? Men and women are biologically different, okay? Men and women are biologically different. Another way of putting it, 2 and 2 equals 4. But the so-called progressive, they're not at all, the fascistic, Marxist, whichever term you want to use, progressive, narcissistic stormtroopers of political correctness, Twitter stormtroopers, are insisting that you believe 2 and 2 equals 5. And it's a very simple thing. If you want something to happen, which, if you had an open debate, you couldn't win it, and therefore it couldn't happen, you simply don't have the debate. And, I have a phrase, if you want to know and see the foundation elements of this agenda of human mass control, look at the subjects you cannot have another opinion about. Look at the subjects where if you have a different opinion to the official narrative, you're going to get abuse, ridicule, and other consequences. That's the agenda. Simply for this reason. if you can't win a debate on facts, and of course men and women are not biologically different, it's not a debate you can win on facts, then you don't have the debate. You shout down, abuse people who have that. And we were talking beforehand. I posted something on my website today, which I saw this morning, where there's a meeting at a university in America, and there's speakers there. A woman she's sitting down, but a woman spoke, one of the speakers, who was kind of an academic in her field. And she said, well, it's obviously that there are biological differences between men and women, because if you look at the facts, F-A-C-T-S, I think that's spelled, people will forget that soon, then the vast majority of men are taller than women. Women have different have fat in different places. They have different muscular types. People in the audience started walking out. She's just saying the bloody obvious, and they're walking out. Why is she saying 2 and 2 equals 4? They believe 2 and 2 equals 5, and you insist everyone else does. Cameraman follows them out, and they're out in the lobby saying that's fascist. We can't sit and listen to that fascism. What? That men and women are biologically different? This is where we are going, and this is why it's so important that people are not intimidated into silence. Because I meet so many people who say, yeah, it's a load of nonsense, but you know, look what happens if you say so. And you know, one of my roles, if you like, is of being the kid, pointing at the naked emperor while everyone's sycophantically hovering around saying, wonderful new clothes, emperor, oh, what a lovely jacket. And I'm saying, hold on a minute, the guy's freaking naked. Got no bloody clothes on, what are you talking about? And that, of course, is 2 and 2 equals 4. They are, and it's systematic. It's being done systematically to shut people up. What is political correctness? I'll give it in a line. It's manipulating the target population to silence itself. That's what it is.
And false flag events, David, you've blown us on a couple of them. What is a false flag event? Event for people who don't know.
Well, one of the phrases I came up with that has now become into quite common parlance in the alternative media anyway, I came up with it in the 1990s, was problem, reaction, solution. This is so important. There's 2 mass manipulation techniques, because this is the bottom line. This conspiracy is a conspiracy to psychologically program the population. Why do people behave the way they do? Why does someone behave that way and someone behave that way? Perception. That person's perception leads them to behave that way. This person's perception leads them to behave this way. And where does perception come from? Information received. People process information received, and they reach their perception. So if you can control information received, you control perception, you control behavior. This is what happens when you control information. And if you control it totally, which is where they're going, as I've just talked about, then you eventually control behavior totally, because you're controlling all perception. What problem, reaction, solution, and its stablemate, what I call the totalitarian tiptoe, are psychological manipulation techniques, and they're used on us all the time. Problem, reaction, solution. Other people call it false flag. You want to change the world in a certain way, and you know that if you stand up and openly say, this is what we're going to do, you're going to get a big resistance against it. People are going to say, we're not having that, what's going on? What are you doing that for? There's no reason. So what you do is you give them a reason. Stage 1, you create a problem. Could be a terrorist attack, it could be a financial collapse, could be a government collapse, could be whatever. You then tell the population via an unquestioning and pathetic mainstream media the version of that problem you want them to believe. You name the villain, you name the reason for why that problem is happening, when you, in the shadows, have actually made it happen. At stage 2 of problem, reaction, solution, you want a reaction from the public of outrage, of fear, of whatever the reaction is required. And then you want them to in effect say, do something, something must be done. And then those who've created the problem covertly and blamed someone else and got you to believe it, then offer the solutions to the problems they've created. And they are solutions that push on this agenda for the world of more and more control, more and more centralization of power, more and more dictatorship. And they can make that happen with the solution to a manufactured problem that they couldn't have done without the problem.